a former walk-on football player at the University of Washington, where his career consists of just 2 plays from scrimmage. But years later, he is now the second-year head coach for the University of Wyoming, and his Cowboys are coming off of a New Mexico Bowl victory over Fresno. As you can imagine, expectations are high here in Laramie, but the coach is the kind of guy that holds his cards pretty close to the vest. But he opened up to us for a conversation with Dave Christensen. Have you had any traditions since you got here?
I have. We have what we call our cowboy walk. We stay at a hotel just a block away at the Hilton, and then we walk over as a team to the locker room prior to the games, and that's a tradition that we're trying to build upon. We're trying to reestablish the tradition of being cowboy tough around here.
Coach, we know how intense you are, how driven you are about bringing this Wyoming football program up into the upper echelons of the Mountain West, but I'm interested in knowing what you were like as a kid growing up.
I had I was blessed. I had a 2-parent family at home, and Dad worked hard. He went to work at a paper mill, making toilet paper from the time he graduated from high school. Mom worked in retail, and so we learned some work ethic from them, and they provided for us, and we had a good life. Started playing football when I was 7. Tackle football, organized tackle football. I showed up at the boys' club one day, bigger than most of the kids. It was a 9-year-old league, and I went down there with a friend. They asked me if I wanted some gear. I couldn't believe it. I said, "Yeah, I'll take some. I'll play." And that's kind of how I got started. I hung out a lot at the boys' club, played sports, and that was kind of my youth.
Now, when you got into tackle football, did you get into it because you saw it and you wanted to do it, or did you get into it just to pass the time away?
I think at first when I got into it was just because the equipment was so cool, and I was going to be able to get some equipment. So I just got my own helmet and shoulder pads and put all that stuff on. I had to, I just had to do it. And it kind of took off from there. I was always bigger than most kids my age, and so I continued on with it until I got too big to play at the boys' club, and we didn't have it in our junior high school. So I had a hiatus there for 3 years, and then it got going again in high school.
When did you start loving it?
Probably when I was in high school. When I started playing 7 years old, everybody was 9, even though I was a little bit bigger, maturity-wise and physically, they got the best of me. And so it was a little tougher then, but in high school, I think probably when my high school coach, who was a great influence on my life, approached me after my freshman year and said that I think you really got a chance to be a great player for us, and there's some things you're gonna have to do, and from that point on, it was driven. I was driven to be the best I could be, and it became my passion at that point in time.
Was this back in the day when if you were a big kid, you automatically played the line?
Yeah, that was. When I was a freshman, I tried to say that I was a tight end, and they said no, you're not a tight end, and so I thought, well, if I can be a center, at least I can touch the football. So I told them I'd play center. But yeah, I wanted to be the running back, the quarterback. Everybody does, but that didn't last long. I went right to the line. That's where I stayed.
You said your high school coach pulled you aside and let you know that you were going to be a factor. What did that mean to you, and how did that affect the way you took on the sport then?
That probably changed my outlook on football more than anything. It was a guy that I had a great deal of respect for. Tony Whitefield is my head football coach, has since passed away at Everett High School, and I had so much respect for him and the professionalism that he how he carried himself. And so when he pulled me aside, it really motivated me. I think a lot of the things that I do is as far as trying to be professional, attention to detail, came from Coach Whitefield. And at that point in time, my focus really became in the sport of football. At that point in time as a player, and I had a chance to come back and coach for him for a year at the high school, and it was a turning point in my life for me.
Looking back on that now, do you see and appreciate how a coach can make an impact on a kid's life like that?
Absolutely, and I hope I make as many positive impacts as I think Coach Whitefield did, for the kids that went through that program. And I think about it all the time because that was a turning point in my life. That was the point in time where I put all my focus on the sport of football. At that point in time as a player, and with the passion I had then, and because of the way I was treated by my coaches, not only Coach Whitefield but Coach James at the University of Washington. Those are the two greatest influences on my life to get me into this profession.
So what type of player were you like in high school?
Probably not very good, about like I was in college. I was probably an okay high school player. I was a little bit bigger. I was aggressive. I wasn't the strongest guy in the world. I lacked size, strength, and speed. And if it weren't for those things, I probably could have been a great college player and an NFL player.
Do you think you would have recruited you?
Absolutely not.
Did you play any other sports growing up?
I tinkered around with basketball, baseball, wrestling, track and field, but nothing like football. Those things I might have done a season or two and done some recreational things, but football was really my passion.
Now, growing up, you had an older brother who passed away. Tell us about that.
Well, when I was in 8th grade, I had a brother that was I think he was a sophomore in high school at that point in time, and he had got a virus in his heart, and his heart enlarged, and we thought he had the flu at that point in time, and then he went through a stage of about 2-3 months, and just got worse and worse and worse, and of course at that point in time, what they can do now is so much different. And I remember, I was 14 years old, so it was quite a while ago, but I remember, talking about, possibly him going to Stanford for a heart transplant. And at that point in time, there might have been 4 or 5 of them done in the world. That was about the only option. He had something that was called myocarditis, and it's a virus that attacks your heart and enlarges it. And, he just went until his heart stopped.
How did that affect you as a child growing up?
It was a tough time for me. He was my only sibling, and I think it was difficult for my parents to go through, my grandparents. I mean, I look back on it now, I can't imagine anything being more devastating than a parent losing a child. For me at that point in time, I used that to motivate myself, to make sure that I made good choices, that I could do things to make my parents proud. Being the only son that they had left, the only child they had left, I wanted to make sure that I did things to make them proud and to honor my brother. And but it was a trying time as a kid. It's just I'd never experienced death before at any level. I'd never been to a funeral before. So it was an eye-opening experience.
Is this something that you still think about?
I do. He passed away on April 14th. Obviously, every year at that time, I'll go back and think through times that we had spent together, and it motivates me. I often wonder, how he would have felt about where I'm at in my career now, and what he'd have been doing, and how involved he'd have been. So, yeah, it's something. I don't spend time daily, but I certainly do reflect.
And you say you use it as motivation at times?
I do. That I just feel that I'm so blessed to be in a position that I'm in, and and he wasn't, and so I'm a very, very driven person. I think maybe that experience has a lot to do with it. Why I'm so passionate about what I do, why I'm so driven about what I do. I think it's just because I feel that I'm blessed to be in this position, and I don't want to let anything pass me up.
And it became time for you to go to college. What was your career path? I mean, did you have a choice? Was there a fork in the road?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a college football player. I grew up loving the Washington Huskies. I used to go down and take the bus down with my dad and watch the Huskies play, and I wanted to be a Husky. I had the great respect for Don James and a lot of the current Husky players at that time. But I ended up going to a junior college right out of high school. Went to Yakima Valley. I was there for a quarter. Called Jim Lambright at the time, who was from my hometown, was a defense coordinator at Washington, told him I wanted to walk on at Washington. And so I went to a junior college back in my hometown in the winter, and then spring enrolled at Washington, and walked on. And I'll never forget the first time that I got to put on a Washington practice uniform. It was the biggest deal in the world to me to be a Husky. And then when I ran out that tunnel, it was a phenomenal thing. I mean, it was the greatest thing. I mean, growing up in high school, I wore Husky shirts every day. I wore every single day. Everything I had was purple. I mean, it was huge to me.
Now, what's it like to actually achieve that goal? Because a lot of kids make dreams and say, hey, I want to do this and I want to do this. And you actually achieved your goal of playing for the Huskies.
I did. It was phenomenal. I mean, it was a great feeling. You know, I got a Rose Bowl ring. You know, I went to some bowl games. You know, played with some of the greatest players in the country. And you know, my varsity career was 2 varsity plays. You know, we were beating Cal 50-0 or something, and they were putting everybody in. And I got in and got to play a couple plays. But the relationships that I developed with the kids I played with, and the coaches on that staff, obviously with Coach Pinkel, Don James, you know, that whole thing is why I'm where I'm at today. And but it was to reach that goal, to actually, I mean, I remember sitting in those stands as a high school kid watching the line warm up, thinking, you know, I'm going to do whatever I can to someday wear that W on my helmet and be able to warm up in that line. And I got there.
You mentioned Don James. What type of influence did he have on your coaching career?
Coach James had a huge impact on my coaching career also. You know, nobody in my family, immediate family, had gone on to college. They all had to go to work right out of high school and work to provide for their families. And I had a chance to get to college. And I remember Coach James constantly talking about the importance of a college degree. You know, I still believe to this day that, you know, in the back of my mind, every single time I thought about just going and getting a job, because, you know, I went through college for 6 years, of Coach James talking about the importance of the degree. I mean, that's what drove me to get a college degree, because of Coach James. And then, you know, I learned a lot from Coach. I mean, he's the most organized, disciplined, care about people. I mean, here's a guy that was my college coach. I played 2 varsity snaps for him, okay? There's been kids in my career that I probably don't even remember that got in for 2 varsity snaps. And then when I was up for the Broyles Award 3-4 years ago, lo and behold, who's flying down to Arkansas to be there at the award but Coach James. And, you know, to bring me back and let me coach there. And again, I didn't contribute a lot to winning and losing there. But, you know, he treated me as well as any scholarship player. And I think that's the thing that I learned from him, is that, you know, across the board, they're all the same. And I think if you know, you need to treat people that way, and he did, and it was a huge influence on me that, you know, this lousy walk-on was just as special as, you know, Warren Moon starting quarterback.
I read somewhere where you said you would either be a football coach or in law enforcement. What was it about law enforcement? You know,
I you know, was very intrigued in law enforcement. When I was in college, a lot of times on the weekends in the off season, I'd go back to my hometown and go sign up to ride with the police in town and go on the beat with them and do those type of things. I was just very interested in the law enforcement field and you know, just again giving back to our society and helping people make good decisions, or helping them to make good decisions. And it was something I had a great deal of interest in. I started taking a lot of tests with the Washington State Patrol, and I was moving along that testing stage that they have, and then it was at the exact same time where I had an opportunity to go to Eastern Washington, work on a master's degree, and start coaching, and get an opportunity to college coach. And so that's when I stopped the test and started coaching there, and I've been fortunate to coach every year since then.
Do you ever think about what would have happened if you would have taken that law enforcement path?
You know, I really don't. I mean, it's I'm sure it would have been you know, a pretty thrilling career, but you know, there's also a lot of other things that go along with it, and you know, I have a great deal of respect you know, for our people that serve us as law enforcement agencies.